Great to see you guys tonight. My name is Zach. I'm the young adults pastor here at Lifepoint, and it's a joy to be back. You know, during Christmas time, people often travel, people go away. You guys are often unfortunately, the few that haven't gone away. You're stuck in Rothwell, but where else would you want to be than the well? Come on. Good, thank you for the 6 people that clapped. Yeah, I actually went away recently. I went to the US. I ran in a marathon, and I won a free flight to San Francisco. How good is that? And the best thing about winning a flight by running a marathon, it gives you so many more opportunities to bring up naturally in conversation how I've actually completed a marathon. So how good is that? That's fantastic. I flew over maybe 2-3 weeks ago. I just got back this week. And I have one of those mums that's a stressor. Does anyone else have a mum that's a real stressor that kind of worries about it? I was going over on my own, and she was really, really concerned about what was going to happen to me in the US because there's guns and all this kind of stuff. And she's sending me, I kid you not, I'm getting an article a day via text from my mum. Trump's changed the immigration laws. They're not going to let you in the country. You're going to get deported, all this kind of stuff. And I'm getting this day after day. I'm thinking, Mum, please, I'll be perfectly fine. There's like hundreds of thousands of people going into the US every day. I'll be totally fine. And so I make my way over. And when you get kind of to the gate of San Francisco, it's a 14-hour flight, a long flight. You go to a kind of a thing that looks something like this. And you walk up there, you hand over your passport, and there was this really friendly, lovely guy, and he just starts kind of asking about what I'm doing in the US and kind of who I'm staying with, and am I working or holidaying and stuff like that. And I'm just talking to him, and the conversation's going pretty well. And then he says, "Oh, did you buy your flight? Did you buy your own flight over here?" And I kind of heard own flight more than I heard buy, and I just said, yeah, I bought my own flight over here. And he said, "Oh, okay, how much did it cost you?" I thought, oof. Actually, I ran in this marathon, and I kind of got pulled out of this lucky draw, and I won a flight. I didn't actually pay for it myself. And I kid you not, his face completely changed in that moment. He thought I was suspect. And he said 2 words, "Escort now." And all of a sudden, this lady in this suit just starts walking towards me and says, "Sir, you're going to need to come with me. Sir, you need to follow me. Just take your bag and follow me." And she starts leading me away into the back room of customs at San Francisco Airport. I walk into this room, we had to walk around like 3 different curves of this hallway. And I walk into this room. She takes my passport. She takes it back kind of behind some wall. And she just says, "Just sit there." And there's all these signs up all around saying you're not allowed your phone out. I'm freaking out a little bit at this point. I'm thinking, I think my mum was right. I'm about to get deported. I'm about to head back to Australia. And there was a lot of fear going on in my mind at that moment. I did pack my own suitcase. It was just a carry-on, by the way. I got around the whole of US with a carry-on, and I did get through in the end, so don't stress. It's not a bad end of the story. But I was pretty fearful in that moment. I was like, am I going to be okay here? This whole 2-week trip is just going to go up in smoke. I'm going to be sent back to Australia. You may not have the risk tonight of getting deported from Australia. I don't know your story. I'm going to guess maybe you don't. But you may have some fears that you are sitting with tonight as we approach the Christmas season. And there's a question that's often going around in the back of our mind when there's something that kind of triggers us, and there's a fear response in us, just like there was for me at American Border Patrol. And there's a question that goes around that just in our mind that says, I'm not going to be okay. Am I going to be okay? I don't think I'm going to be okay. And maybe some of the fears that you have, I'm just going to put a few up on the screen. And you may be sitting with these tonight as you think about your own life. You might have a fear of failure. Maybe you've made a big decision. Maybe it's a university course. Maybe it's a job for the future. And you're fearful that you might fail. Maybe you fear rejection. You don't really want to put yourself out there. You don't want to invite someone to something. You're worried that someone will reject you. Maybe you fear disappointment, so you don't want to get your hopes up. And you're sitting with that fear tonight, that if I just don't get my hopes up, then I won't get disappointed, because you have a deep fear that you're going to be let down. Maybe you have a fear of losing control. And so you like to keep things very ordered, all right, and very close and very tight-knit because I don't want to lose control of what's happening in my life. Maybe you have a fear of other people's opinions of you, and this family Christmas is stressing you out because Auntie Jean, Cousin Joe, what are they going to say to me? What are they going to think of me? As you head to your family Christmas, maybe it's what others' opinions of you is. I don't know, maybe it's something else. You can insert your own. But it's a thing that if it happened, you would think, I'm not going to be okay. Just like I was in the San Francisco airport, you're sitting there tonight with a bit of a fear of what is to come. And the thing about Christmas is it's actually about not fearing. 3 times in the Bible, all right, we're going to open the Bible tonight and I'll read a bit of a story in a moment. And if you're new to church, if you're kind of new to Lifepoint tonight and you don't know much about the Bible, it's got the stories. The story we'll read tonight is 2,000 years old, and we believe it's got relevance, it's got power, it's got life in it that we can learn from tonight. And 3 times the angel speaks in the Christmas story, and all 3 times, once to Mary, once to Joseph, once to a bunch of shepherds in the fields, says, don't be afraid. That's the very first thing the angels say. Don't be afraid. So Christmas is not about fearing, it's about being fearless. And so the question I want to touch on tonight is, what do we do with our fears this Christmas? You might be sitting with a fear right now. What do we do with our fears? If Christmas is about not fearing, what do we do with our fears this Christmas? And so we're going to open the Bible, we're going to read a story, and there's really kind of 2 characters. One is a singular character, one is a group of characters that we can learn from. One about what we should do, and one about what we probably shouldn't do. So I'm going to open the text and we're going to read together as a church. It goes like this. This is from Matthew chapter 2. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. Bit of context. King Herod, all right, he was the guy that was in charge of this kind of section, which is kind of modern-day Jerusalem and the surrounding kind of areas. 2,000 years ago, he was in charge of this section, and he was kind of employed by the Romans, because they oversaw the whole of the area, to look after the area of Judea. He was kind of Jewish, but he was also kind of not Jewish. There's kind of a bit of argument of whether he was or wasn't. And they actually called him King of the Jews. That was his title. And so we go on. About that time, some wise men came from the eastern lands and arrived in Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." And there's a fear starts in Herod. Hey, no, I'm meant to be King of the Jews. That's my title. That's me. Who's this newborn child? There's a fear response in him, and King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. We'll keep reading. Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from the time that when the star first appeared. Then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too." That was a false story, by the way. He made it up so that he doesn't want to actually worship Jesus. He wants to do something else to him, which we'll get to in a sec. After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. We'll keep going. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And when it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in the dream not to return to Herod. And Herod was furious when he realized that the wise men had outwitted him. He sent soldiers to kill all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, based on the wise men's report of the star's first appearance. It's a story of great joy. It's also a very sad story to hear of how Herod reacts in fear. And so we're going to look at 2 groups of people. One is just King Herod and his reaction to fear, and the other is the wise men and their reaction to fear. Herod is what not to do as we're sitting with fear tonight. Herod's response is, I'm not going to be okay. I need to be the only king of the Jews. And so he sits with fear and he reacts out of fear. I don't know about you tonight. Maybe there's a cloud of fear over your life. And as you sit with it, it kind of almost takes over your brain, takes over your thoughts, takes over what your actions and what you do. I'm going to be honest, it seems like Herod blew this out of proportion a little bit. If you got wind of some random people looking for a king from a 500-year-old prophecy from a random land, you think Herod would be a bit like, go for your life, guys, enjoy, good luck. Like, it's a crazy random thing that's going on here. Let's just be honest with that up front. And sometimes there's a crazy random thing that might happen to us that triggers a kind of fear response. Maybe it's a text, maybe it's something someone said to you, and you're like, you get that reaction. When we sit with the fear, it can kind of cloud over us. And then Herod goes even beyond that and reacts out of the fear. This is when fear starts telling you what to do. It becomes in charge. It starts giving out the orders. And so what does Herod do? He twists the truth. He tries to trick the wise men. I don't know about your fears, whether you're tempted at times to give a false kind of account, whether you want to twist kind of what the truth really is to appear a certain way, to avoid your fears. And then he gets overprotective of his role, and he actually completes a genocide. He makes a call that is horrific, that is awful. And sometimes in our fear we can get overprotective of our relationships, overprotective of our status, overprotective of our roles or responsibilities, and we can react out of fear. And so this is what not to do when it comes to our fears. Not to sit with them and let them control us, and not to react out of them. And then we come to the second kind of group of characters. This is the wise men, and I've chucked 4 on the screen just to keep you guessing. All right, it's like the Bible doesn't say there was necessarily 3 wise men. There was 3 gifts. I've just chucked a 4th in there just to kind of mess with you guys. And these wise men traveled a long way, right? The Bible doesn't give stacks of information about exactly kind of where they came from and who they were. We don't have as much information as we have about Herod. But we know they probably came from the area of Persia, all right, which was the area of what is kind of modern-day Iran. So I did some Google Maps course research. 499 hours they were walking to get to Bethlehem. That's a pretty solid trek, all right? These guys are pretty committed. And it doesn't look like a very nice walk, to be honest. Given by the colour schemes of the terrain, it looks like it's mostly just barren desert to walk through. 2,205 kilometres. These guys, no doubt, had fear. They were following a 500-year-old prophecy. They're following a star up in the sky. I can't imagine how hard it was. I was just in the US driving on the right-hand side of the road. That was difficult enough, going to be honest. I only drove down the wrong side of the road twice. I thought that was pretty impressive. Thank you so much. Thanks, Danny. They had to travel a long, long way. It's not a hike through a rainforest they were on. I'm sure they would have had questions. I'm sure they would have had fears. Fear of losing control. They're like, what have I gotten myself into here? Why am I on this crazy expedition? Why did I follow Baza all the way over here? What am I doing? Whose idea was this? Fears of being in a foreign land and kind of not knowing what's going on. Maybe they had fears of rejection. Have I traveled all this way with this gift and with this group of people to worship someone, and it turns out they don't even want us? Maybe they traveled with disappointment. What if Jesus doesn't like my gift? What if Jesus isn't a frankincense guy? I'm sure they had fears as well. And yet, this is what they did with their fear. They didn't sit with it. They didn't react out of it. I'm going to go to the verse that centers on the concept that I want to hit home tonight. With their fear, they entered the house and they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Their response to fear was worshipping a baby. Pretty crazy. Pretty out of this world. I don't know what your response is to that. If I'm saying, hey, you know what to do to deal with your fear is to worship a baby. This was the wise man's response. You might be thinking, come on, don't you know what I'm going through? Don't you know the things that keep me awake at night? Don't you know how long this season has been? Don't you know how long I've been living this fear? Don't you know that I'm not going to be okay, Zach? Worshipping a baby, is this really the solution to our fears? I've actually got a little baby of my own, little Ollie. Can we bring him up here tonight? This is my beautiful wife, Mariah. Thanks so much, beautiful. We're actually married 7 years today. Give it up. I was at an event last night, and Maggie, who was just up here on worship, she said, Zach, when's your wedding anniversary? And I thought about it. Tomorrow. Okay. So thank you so much, Maggie, for bringing that to my attention. We had planned to celebrate at a later date. So this is little Ollie. He is 7 months. Thank you, babe. Good with dates. He's 7 months old. And I can tell you, when I am in fear, all right, if I get home from a day where my brain's been working a million miles an hour and I've got fears of like, what do people think of me? I've got fears. I cuddle this little boy and I can tell you the fears honestly start to disappear. As I look at him, as I connect with him, my priorities start to shift. My perspective starts to shift. And I think, you know what, my fears, they're so small and insignificant. Because when I look at this little boy, everything seems to fall into perspective. Everything seems to fall into place. And there's a verse from the Bible that says this, he must become greater. This is John 3:30, and it talks about Jesus. Jesus must become greater. I must become less. He really wants this microphone, as you can see. Yeah, you do, little precious boy. And as I hold little Ollie, my fears start to become less. Because he is magnified, he is greater, he is my priority. My fears are like, whatever, I don't know, that's not important right now. What is important is this little boy and his future and my responsibility to him. So he is a great fear curer, I can tell you. If you want to book in for a 5-minute hold to kind of deal with your fears, we'll start taking bookings. No, it probably does help a little bit, I'm going to be honest. Thanks, babe, you can take him. Thank you so much. Can we give Ollie a little clap? He doesn't know what's happening right now. Good job, Grayson, too, mate. And so as I hold little Ollie, the perspective shifts. Now, I'm not telling you to worship Ollie or worship a baby tonight. That's not where this is going. But as we look at the truth and as we experience what is actually going on as I'm holding Ollie, fears move away. And so my point tonight is just to take a page out of the wise man's book and to worship your way out of fear. The word, which is the Greek word used for worship in that passage, is a word proskuneo. And it literally means, you know when you see like a royal person and you like kiss their hand and you kind of bow before them? That's kind of the Greek word, that's kind of what it means. They lowered themselves in worship to a baby. It's an admittance that I am not okay. I am not in control, but there is one who is. Amen. And so it's not about worshipping a baby and all, it's about worshipping the true God. You see, when I was in that room, the border control room, and I'm thinking, I'm probably getting sent back to Australia here, I remember just starting to, I didn't bow down and start worshipping and singing out Holy Forever or something like that. But in my brain and in my heart, I just said, all right, God, you got this. An act of worship, an act of saying, God, you must become greater. My fears of what's going to happen in this situation are below what you have in store and what you have planned out. And so the encouragement tonight is just simply this, to worship your way out of fear. It doesn't mean that your circumstances are necessarily going to change, although they might. It doesn't mean that everything's going to necessarily turn out all the way that you hoped it. I'm sure some of the fears that I have as I hold Ollie are actually, they're reasonable fears to have. But as I gaze upon him, as I experience him, they fall to the background. And it's the same, if not 1,000 million times more, as we look to God and as we experience his goodness. I can tell you from time after time in my life about the goodness of God that is coming through in an incredible way. And as we look to him, our fears fade to the background. And you may not be a regular kind of churchgoer. This might be all new to you tonight. And my encouragement is just simply this. Tonight we're going to go into a time of worship, sing a few more songs, is just to look to God. Just center your heart on God. This is what worship is. And you see the baby grows up. They were worshipping little baby Jesus. And all the excitement around this newborn King of the Jews that was going on at the time, and the shepherds and the stars and the angels and all that kind of stuff. 33 years later, it leads to a cross. Taking on the brokenness, the things that you and I have done that have fallen short of the plans that God had for us. It led to a cross. It led to the sacrifice of Jesus. But it led to the resurrection. A new hope, a new joy, a new home. Jesus rising from the dead 3 years later, creating a way for us to be with him forever. He is our home. He has created a way for us to be with him, not only just in this life, but for all eternity. And so I want to finish with just this story. Even in the midst of not being sure whether I was getting sent back to Australia, I knew I was going to be okay because I knew I had a home in Australia. I knew I had my wife and my 2 young boys waiting for me. In fact, this is what I came home to. Welcome home, Daddy. I thought, you know what, even if my greatest fear does come true in this situation and I get sent home, I know I'm going to be okay because I got a home already. And that's the same truth with Jesus. It's the same truth for you tonight. Experiencing the goodness of God. Because of Jesus' death and resurrection, as we worship him, we get to be with him forever. We get to be with him in heaven. We have a home. And if we go back to that picture, just to finish tonight, and the band can come back up, is there's a star in the background. I didn't plan this, by the way, it just happened to be Christmas. The representation of the very star that the wise men followed to worship Jesus. And to let that be our encouragement tonight, despite our fears, the fear of failure, the fear of disappointment, the fear of losing control, and some of us, they might just be stirring in our heart right now. There is a way through, and it looks like, just like the wise men showed, it looks like worshiping our God.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. We really hope you enjoyed that. 2 quick things before we go, okay? 1, we'd love to connect with you. Go to our website, lifepoint.org.au, hit connect, and just give us your details. Someone from our church will be in contact with you. And the second thing is, if you live in the area, around the kind of Moreton Bay or North Brisbane, come along to a service, 8:30, 10 o'clock and 5 p.m. We'd absolutely love to see you here on a Sunday.